I remember being like angry, frustrated, like gritting my teeth, like cringing at the fact that I didn't know if I'd ever make money making music, because I love this thing enough that I know if I can make money with it, this could be a sustainable life and I'll feel good. Whereas I don't know if I love graphic design enough or art enough to say the same thing about it. So the fact that I get to do it is so cool, and I can never lose sight of that. So with that said, like I do feel like it's a little bit of a religious thing, right? Because where else other than a church do you have the opportunity to like see like 100 to 500 other people in a crowd, like all who you kind of feel like you can relate to, and you can like say what up and like walk up to random people and introduce yourself, and you're in this community of people who all feel like we share this thing. And in a church, maybe it's this God concept, but here in the festival scene, it's more like we share this common understanding that we're all on this like long strange trip. It's kind of like we could, you can just wink at somebody in the crowd and they kind of look at you or like smile and you're like, yeah, we get it, we're out here.
Today on the Weird Music Podcast, we've got 5 a.m. Sam from 5 a.m. Trio. So yeah, I was just at Resonance Music Festival, and there was the Rust stage. Sam is with Rust Music, and met these guys backstage, and we both want to do a podcast. So here we are. Sam's an awesome producer. We normally have jam band people on this, but anyways, so Sam, to start this off, man, I want to talk to you about music just from like a fan's perspective. So coming from someone who makes like bass music, that feeling in the crowd can be so like at times overwhelming. Like people have deep personal experiences at live music shows, and you're someone who's kind of on the design end of the whole thing. Like you're more or less architecting that situation. And how do you think sound and different frequencies, like the bass level sounds and then different higher pitch sounds, what is it about sounds and music that can make the music experience so profound?
Yeah, so this is something I think about a lot, in terms of the like storytelling aspect of making music, because like sounds are kind of like characters, and I love to think of sounds as being like kind of like the figure in front of the background, which is silence, I guess. So like it really, I put a lot of thought into like what I put into the sounds and how I make them. And I used to listen to like Flying Lotus and Pretty Lights and stuff like that and be like, okay, so are they making this like by recording it in a studio? Are they like recording the snare drum themselves? Are they like making it with a synthesizer? Are they using like samples or are they like putting a old school funk record on a vinyl and like recording it and getting the sound that way? And I just had no idea. And I just kind of was like, you know what? I'm going to try and synthesize all my sounds. And so for a while, I was spending a bunch of time just like making sounds from scratch. And then I learned that a lot of producers actually use samples, and they sample from old records and breaks and things like that. And so I put in the legwork early on to like learn how to make sounds and like make the sounds that I wanted to hear. And then I learned about sampling, and now I use like a combination of both. But like I really think it goes back like evolutionarily to what sounds meant to us before like we had like a human civilization and society. Just like what sounds mean like out in nature, like maybe like a light rain on the trees means like you're kind of inside and it's peaceful and you're just like taking a breath. So if you could listen to like some ambient sound and just have like a recording of like a light like woodland forest in the background, and sometimes that can like calm you down. Ambient sound has a super uh powerful ability to like change our emotional state and things like that. On the flip side, like sub bass usually means that like something's coming. Like if you hear like a rumble, it could mean like in movies and shit, that means that like Godzilla is about to come to the city and stomp on everything. That's what rumbles meant evolutionarily too, is that like a big elephant or some big creature is coming, or like we're about to have an earthquake. And so I think it gets our adrenaline pumping and it creates this like rush, and that rush is like enjoyable in a safe container. It's in a safe container where we know that like we're just on a dance floor and it's just coming out of the sound system.
Man, That's so fucking cool to think. So evolutionarily, if I think about the word evolutionarily, that means beyond just like, for me, just beyond camp. Like this is like in my DNA almost. Like, what do you really mean when you say evolutionarily?
Yeah, I think I do mean like in your brain stem, the center of your brain that's responsible for like sensation and determining whether there's a threat or not. I think it has to do with like if I'm a squirrel, you know, I'm going to be listening for like any possible sound and looking around and being very aware of things because it's like important for my survival. And I think now we don't have to be as aware of stuff. So sounds can be more enjoyable and like sounds can have meaning beyond just being a threat or not, you know?
So we're talking about like you as a producer, there's characters in your music, but you know, in this whole line of the train of thought here, you're also a fan of bands like Lotus, like jam bands that do a lot of tension and release. There's a lot of tension and release in EDM music too. The climax of the most like aha, blissful tension and release moment one could imagine. Like, so then what is that tapping into?
Something else that's tapping more into something else, I think. Something more mathematical in our brain. And I think through like our young life, we kind of train ourselves to whatever type of music we were listening to at the time. So classical, children's music, pop music, like now that's what I call music. You know, we train ourselves to like whatever that was. And then we have this kind of map in our minds of like the musical intervals. And like when we hear them jam and kind of like do modal interchange and key changes and all sorts of crazy shit, we are having our inner map of like of music, like someone else is kind of navigating around it and showing us new like parts of it, um, almost like in a mathematical sense, like intervals and relationships between because it's all relative, right? Like we only have our musical system and tuning because of the tools that we use to make sound, like just intonation. If people want to Google this, they can look into like the history of tuning and how intervals work and things like that. But basically, like there's like a standard, and we've decided that these notes are this exact pitch, like 440 and or 432 for A, for instance. And so, but it could be anything. It could be 420, you know. That's what I vote for. But it's like it's all relative. It's all like if A is 420, then the octave above that is 840, and the octave above that, it's because the pitch of the sine wave has doubled. So it's all relative. And like the fifth of that note is going to be like a specific relationship of like a fraction to the original one. So it doesn't matter what exact note it is. It's just all about the relationships between the notes. So I think it's like art in the relationship between the pitches. That's kind of what we're experiencing when we hear like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan. I don't know how it affects us like emotionally. Like that part is just a pure mystery. Like why is it that when we hear like these two pitches together, we have an emotional experience? I don't know.
And then when you throw psychedelics into the mix, it's like, for the listener, what does psychedelics do to enhance that experience?
They definitely increase your sensitivity to like sensory phenomenon. So obviously music is a very sensory experience, and they kind of increase your like susceptibility to it and like sensitivity to it. There's like circuitry probably that you have that's sort of activated by psychedelics, not just psychedelics, but also like other things like caffeine. But definitely when things really start warping and changing and feeling super significant, like when I have done psychedelics, I've had moments of like extreme significance and like uncanny pattern alignment. Like things will just happen. Like uh I'll be thinking of a yo-yo and someone will pull out a yo-yo and I'll be like yo-yo, and you know what I'm saying? Like it's like one thing after another, and I'll just be like, whoa. And I haven't done like enough to really get like full on visuals yet. I don't think I've done like a heroic dose to the point where I've gone on like a visual journey, which is kind of a bummer to me because I'm a very visual person. I actually studied art, and music came a little bit later, but so I've always had visions and dreams of like creating time-based art, you know, audio visual or virtual reality or something like that. Like I always wanted to experiment in those realms. And so I'm hoping for that like experience that inspires me in that way. But I'm also not, I'm not expecting it to happen anytime soon. I'm just thinking one day I'll really go down the rabbit hole. But I have a lot of experience with like emotional cleansing and like very like cathartic experiences, especially with mushrooms. They're my favorite. But yeah, just, you know, cathartic, important experiences that felt really significant. And so I think music accompanies those experiences, and it can kind of be like the soundtrack to them, and the synchronicities when the music is good and when it's made in a context where it's kind of like the person who made it is aware of the pacing of psychedelic experiences, like maybe every 5, and it's all arbitrary and subjective, but like every like 2 to 5 minutes your brain might start to like drift into another kind of state. Maybe you'll be less anxious, more chill, less energetic, more tired, and the music can kind of change over time in a way that like accentuates or plays with that. And it's very, I was listening to your conversation with Anthony from Papadosio, and he talks about how you can get the music to be an experimental context for people to listen. And I think that that's like a great way to think of it, because there are no rules. It's not like when I play a G major 7, everyone takes their shirt off, you know. It's not like that. It's not like that scene in Rick and Morty where they're like telling the crowd to do things like, if you're 37 years old, spin around in a circle. It's like, it's not that direct. It's more just like, here's some vibes for whatever you're vibing, and there's a good chance that it'll sync up in a good way. Like more often than not, if the music is well thought out and sort of based in that, rooted in that place that everyone else is familiar with, of the like the melodic jams and funk and soul, it will result in something really positive.
I love that. I can totally relate, like when you talk about significance and just like deep personal connection to being in that moment, just like what it means to know that we're here. And like, uh so you bring up synchronicities, and that like you think about a yo-yo, your friend pulls out a yo-yo and then you're like, yo. I think that's awesome. I would you say you have friends that also have experienced different situations like that as well?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've heard crazy stories over the years of just like people losing and then finding like their friends at festivals at the perfect moment. Someone meeting somebody that has the same name as them, like meeting their doppelganger, and like the craziness that could emerge from that. You know, just like crazy things happening at festivals. It's a common thread. And I love the idea of like shooting the breeze and kind of just having an open-ended campfire conversation that could go anywhere, or like maybe you pass somebody on the walkway and you have like a 3-second interaction, but it just kind of sticks with you and you're just like, that was nice, you know. Like those types of things don't happen as much out in the real world, because we're not as apt to like just stop and say hi to random people on the street. People would think it was weird. But at festivals, that can happen. It's like some of the inhibitions are kind of like softened a little bit at festivals, because we all know that we're all part of this sort of community, and so there's a little bit more openness at festivals that I really appreciate. And like, yeah, I think a lot of that might have to do with the fact that we all kind of see each other as just like-minded. When I think of that, I think of just like psychedelic people, like people who've, you know, gotten in touch with themselves and have less of a stick up their ass and are more approachable and really positive and cool. But you know, that might also just be that's what I want to see, so I see a lot of it. I'm at festivals, you run into all kinds of it's a signal amplifier for everything, you know, like that environment can lead to all kinds of situations, but I think fundamentally it's positive.
So outside of the openness and you bring up like confirmation bias to a degree, outside of that, what do you think the kind of underlying principle or the underlying way things work that would allow for like synchronicities to be amplified? What do you think is at play in that kind of situation, especially that you bring up how psychedelics could impact that?
Mm-hmm. Um, my answer is going to be kind of boring, but it's human pattern recognition. Like we are really good at recognizing patterns. So when we see it, it's fun, it's cool, it's, you know, but I try not to like think about the implications of the patterns, because that's when it starts to like get intense, and it can be mentally taxing to like always be connecting everything. So I'll oftentimes like just kind of, and this is where the mindfulness comes in, is I'll just be like, wow. And I'll just appreciate everything for how it is and all of its weirdness. And I think that like it is sort of connected to like neuroscience. And I'm a very like sciencey guy. Like I really like, I really want to know how things work and get to the root of things. So that's always going to be kind of where my answer falls on that. But I think there is a lot of magic in the world too. I think that, you know, when enough people are gathered together to kind of like recognize it and almost like celebrate it, that makes it more likely to happen.
What does magic mean to you, like when you say it in that context?
Do you know what the word like je ne sais quoi is?
I know, but I've heard it.
Okay, I've heard it too. I'm actually going to Google it real quick. Je ne sais quoi literally means I don't know what. So it's not a very helpful, because I was going to say like, what is magic? I don't know. It's a je ne sais quoi. But like what that literally means is like, I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, I think we just have to settle for that. But I like the word je ne sais quoi, right? It's a cool word.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it literally means like it has a quality that makes it something attractive and nice, but I can't put a finger on what it is. Like, you know, if there is like magic and if you can like, you know, change your reality or whatever, we don't know how it works. We don't know who can do it, who can't do it. Like every society's tried to come up with like some sort of a spiritual framework, but it always leaves some things out that are super important and focuses on things that are totally absurd and unimportant. So I think that it's better to just like have kind of like a general appreciation of spirituality and magic, but not apply too much of a dogma to it. So to me, magic is just like that special something, you know.
There's different ways one could describe the link between meditation and psychedelics and how similar situations can arise out of both. When it comes to creating music and your creativity, like, do you feel like those give someone an edge?
Well, I'll say this, like there's this process of improvement and getting better or making something more refined that you find in like alchemy and also in music making or like all forms of creativity, where it's basically just you have to show up every day and like water the plant of your own like creative process or like your project that you're working on. And like magic has this idea where, or really religion too, has this idea of like, I do this thing every day, like in Judaism, which I'm Jewish. You wake up every morning and you say the Shema, which is like, you know, I'm not religious, but I do know that that's a thing we do. It's like you wake up every morning, say the Shema, which is basically just a reminder that like of God exists and that like all of the people who, you know, who can hear this like should think about it basically. And so like that's super powerful, because if you wake up every day and remind yourself that God exists, like I feel like you're unlikely to that's likely to have some sort of effect on your life. Like if you do that, it's, you know, it's going to make you feel like, oh, maybe there's good things are going to happen. You feel positive. I feel like that's a big reason for why religion is so powerful. But then in the context of magic, it's like I'm going to put things around my space and like meditate in a very focused way on these images and objects to try and make something happen in the world. And I'm going to like put a lot of intention into this thing and like think about it and get everything ready and like perfect and in its right place, and then I'm going to do this ritual. I don't really do that very often, but I like have read about it, and like I feel like shows and like music making is kind of like that for me. It's like I'm going to put everything in its right place, and I'm gonna make a plan, and I'm gonna do this weird ritual, which is just me playing keyboard and like making music. And so doing that every day, or doing that and making that a practice, any kind of practice, is gonna make you like better and better and better at it, and you're kind of gonna feed this like energy for it inside of yourself. And so that's the connection I see between magic and creativity, is like ritual and pattern, where you every day you do this thing, and if you just keep sustaining that pattern, eventually it just keeps feeding that energy and it grows into something. So it's kind of like it's super powerful, and it's something I try to apply to my music all the time, where I'm like, I know I don't want to work on music today, maybe I'm a little tired, but it's time to make music, like, and if I do it, then it's gonna pay off and be fruitful. It's going to bear fruit. So like The War of Art is a really good book about that, where he actually sees it as a spiritual practice, where he's trying to summon the muses. I mean, I don't think he would like say it that way necessarily as the first thing he says, but in the book he talks about like
this is Stephen Pressfield, right?
Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art. Yeah. There's like the forces of like the muses, which is like the creative energy in the world. And then there's like resistance, which he would liken to like dark energy. And like resistance is when you would rather do anything other than just make your art, or go into your own creative practice. And like, you're like, oh, let me clean the room first. Oh, let me go for a walk first. Oh, let me take a shower first. Oh, let me make make food. And you'd think of everything you could possibly do before you make your art. And he would say like, just, first thing in the morning, or first thing when you get to work, like sit down and start and make your art like every day. And it's just kind of like this chore that you do, but it's bigger and more important than a chore. But it's basically like, you're not supposed to be inspired every time you sit down and make art. You're not supposed to be have like this big idea in your head, and a crazy story to go along with it, and a whole release plan when you make art. You're just supposed to sit down and tend to your work like it's like a garden, and you're like watering the plants. You just sit down and you just draw something, or sit down, write a beat, do something on the keyboard a little bit, and it'll, more often than not, it'll turn into something cool, and you'll start to get into the flow after like 15-20 minutes. You'll be like, okay, this is pretty cool. And maybe you get stuck, or time runs out and you got to get to work, or you got to go to bed. At least you did your art that day, and tomorrow it could be even better. And so that's kind of the idea behind that. But as far as like the connection of, so magic and like ritual do like, or like ritual, let's say ritual does make art better. Like I think doing it every day and making it into a ritual makes it better. As for psychedelics, I actually don't want to say that psychedelics make art better, because look at like Frank Zappa, look at I mean, some of my friends who don't really indulge in psychedelics, who are making amazing art. I have a lot of people like inspirations that I know were not always indulging in psychedelics, or any form of like intoxicant when they were working, and they're still making crazy shit. So I don't think it's like necessary, but it's super inspiring, and it's super like, I can totally see why it would help a lot. Like I think it probably does have a big impact, but I don't think that psychedelics are like necessary to like create art. I think more so it's, or to create the type of art that I enjoy. I think it's more so like life experience is probably a bigger driver for like moving creativity, and psychedelics being like one of those possible experiences. So like there's art that's like kind of shitty, and oftentimes it can be made by people who are younger, or like in school, or like one of the big factors is like people who just haven't had a lot of life experience. Like you could be really good at drawing the figure, but that isn't going to like create a sustaining career unless you've like had enough experiences to, or that spark that drives you to like want to do more elaborate paintings, or like a certain type of figure drawing that's pushing. I mean, hell, if somebody wants to go do figure drawing every day, that's amazing. Like they should. I wish I had the bandwidth to do figure drawing, but if somebody wants to like excel or like push their craft or like really dive into something, one of the best things to do would probably be like go on a hiking trip, or like, yeah, travel to another country, or pick up and or start reading a new book. Like sometimes the things that really drive you in your creative process are, or do psychedelics, right? But like the things that really drive you in the creative process are like things that get you out of your usual like patterns.
Mm. So, you know, you mentioned a lot the ritual of making music, and, you know, there's also a ritual of performing music. So, like, talking about that live performance setting, is there a sense of meaning and purpose that you feel being the one who's on stage, like providing people with that experience? Like, you go on tour and, you know, like your fans come out and see you. What does it mean to you?
I mean, I'm super grateful. That's the thing I'll lead with, is just to say that like it's hard to believe sometimes. Like I didn't get into music really until after college. I mean, I was playing guitar in high school, and I like played guitar in my like high school youth group that I was in. And like, you know, I was in jam bands, and like literally just bands that would get together and jam every once in a while in school. But then I really dove into music after I graduated, and I was like, I don't want to just be a graphic designer working at an app company. Like I want to do this weird shit. I want to play shows and be at festivals, and like, oh, you mean there's this whole other world of like of crazy music, and you know, light shows and dancers and painters and vendors and like all these people who are passionate about this. So I immediately got swept up by the music, but it was kind of late in life. But you know, with that said, I've been at it for 10 years. Like I opened up Ableton for the first time in 2010. So with that said, it's amazing. I'm so grateful for it, because at that time I was like, maybe I could do that one day, but I was also like, oh man, is this even worth it? Like I remember being like angry, frustrated, like gritting my teeth, like cringing at the fact that I didn't know if I'd ever make money making music. And I was like, I want to one day make money with music. Like because I love this thing enough that I know if I can make money with it, this could be a sustainable life and I'll feel good. Whereas I don't know if I love graphic design enough or art enough to say the same thing about it. So the fact that I get to do it is so cool, and I can never lose sight of that. So with that said, like I do feel like it's a little bit of a religious thing, right? Because where else other than a church do you have the opportunity to like see like 100 to 500 other people in a crowd, like all who you kind of feel like you can relate to, and you can like say what up and like walk up to random people and introduce yourself, and you're in this community of people who all feel like we share this thing. And in a church, maybe it's this God concept, but here in the festival scene, it's more like we share this common like understanding that we're all on this like long strange trip. You know, it's kind of like you can just wink at somebody in the crowd and they kind of look at you or like smile, and you're like, yeah, we get it, we're out here, you know. And I really like that, being able to facilitate that. And also like so I play with the trio, and like being able to be people on stage who are playing instruments is a really important thing that I think to bring into the bass music scene, because a lot of bass music kids are like uh, really focused on dubstep and like sound system culture, and they want to hear sub bass. But what's going on in the beats oftentimes is like not much is happening live. Really, people are just spinning on CDJs. They've got two decks, and they have one track in one deck, one track in the other deck, and like a fader in between with effects. And that is its own art form. And I actually want to get better at it. Like I'm trying to learn how to do that, because they just get to fly around with a USB in their pocket and just pop the USB into the mixer. It's got all their tracks on it, and then the decks become their own tracks, and then they can just select the next track to cue in, and then just press play and bring it in. And there's a skill involved in like key matching, beat matching, feeling out the vibe, like telling a story live with the music. And that's kind of like the ritual aspect of it. But But what we get to do with the trio, so it's Zone Drums is a drummer, and Tigris plays bass and does turntablism and more synths, and I play keys. And what we get to do is give people something on stage to engage with, to kind of like remind them that like there's real humans up here and we're having fun and being creative. And that can sometimes I just think I'm excited about it. Like I think there's a merit to both being like CDJ, DJ, and Ableton DJ and a live performer. But I think we have this opportunity to make these beats that bump as hard as like Detox Unit or Jade Cicada or Tipper, or, you know, name whoever, Pretty Lights, but that also have like this organic jazz, funk, soul inspired undercurrent to them. So yeah, big ups to Zone Drums and Tigris. And the cool thing about the trio too is that there's 3 people on stage. So after we finish a song that I've been like super like heavy on the keys, and like we end it, and then I'm kind of like trying to catch my breath or whatever, and then Aaron will get on the mic and he'll be like, "Yo, what's up, guys? What's up, you know, whatever." He'll talk on the mic, and like I'll be able to like, kind of like get a little breather, drink some water, and so someone else can be the kind of like hype man, because part of what this like community ritual is keeping the people like excited and happy. Because really, if the music stops, people start looking around like a fish out of water, kind of like, where are we? What's going on? Like, where's my friends? Has anybody seen a pink water bottle? You know, just like shit gets hairy when the music like stops, and you know, in the middle when it's not supposed to. So let's say the music stops by accident, maybe the mixer overheats or some shit. I'll just get on the mic and just be like, "How's everybody doing out there?" And all of a sudden, you just get this huge positive wave through the crowd, and everybody just throws their hands up and it's like, "Yeah!" And it's like, wow, that's powerful. That like somebody up on the stage can ask one simple question, and everybody just like cheers and feels good. And like then it matters what you say after that and how you navigate it. And, you know, like one of my favorite in terms of like stage presence is Keith from the band Wax Future. He always like has something to say, and it's always like very like meaningful to the place where he is and to the crowd, that and he wants to impact the crowd. He wants them to get to know each other better and to have a good time. And yeah, that really inspires me. And so he'll say stuff like, "All right, on the count of 3, everybody introduce yourself to the person next to you." You know, just like think about how the like exponential positive waves that could come from that. So yeah, it's a unique and really like special position. I try to have a good relationship with my own ego, and I'm less egotistical in general. Like I judge myself a lot and don't want to blurt out the wrong thing, or like put on, or like be pretentious, or act like I'm any more than I am or less. You know, I just want to kind of be present. So I don't want to overthink the ego side of it. Like, oh, I'm this one guy up in front of all these people. So I try to let the music talk a lot of the time too. Like actually at Resonance, there was a track I played called Compassion that's unreleased, that has a Ram Dass vocal in it. And he's kind of talking about like, do not say that I'll depart tomorrow, for even today I still arrive. And it's kind of all about like, don't he says like, call me by my correct names, is like the idea. It's this old like Zen poem. It might be Zen or it might be another religion, so I don't want to, but it's a poem that he talks about. And he's kind of like, I'm the autumn leaves in the spring, but I'm also the worm on the leaves, and I'm also the tiger, but I'm also the thing that gets eaten by the tiger. Like he's kind of saying like, I'm everything. It's just this amazing imagery. And it's like, my joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom. My pain is like a river of tears, you know, shit like that. And it's like super like deep. And I was like, oh wow, it works on this beat that I made. Like I'll listen to podcasts and stuff on YouTube, and I'm trying to think of more creative sound material as well. But I want to sample like these little vocal sections where somebody's really like going at it, talking about life and the universe, and kind of like time it correctly so that it really just matches what's happening in the song. And at Resonance Festival, I played this track where Ram Dass talks in the middle. And at that moment, I found out that like somebody was getting like medevaced out of the crowd at the time when I started. And so a bunch of people were like hype and ready to turn up. But then like a golf cart comes into the crowd with like the siren going up, and everybody's like, whoa, you know. And then that track comes on and Ram Dass starts talking. And so for a lot of people, that was like much needed right then. And so somebody came up to me after, was like, thank you for playing that song when you did, because I would have otherwise, like, I don't know what I would have done. Like people like, I was going to freak out. I was like, maybe I just took a dose and like it was going to turn like a little weird. But then that song really kept me grounded. And so like that right there is kind of like if anything is proof that music is powerful, that's it,
Man, so like, how do you hope, like punk music will make people mosh, and really amazing, like coffee jazz music is just so like lovely in the morning. Like, how do you hope your music, and maybe there's a couple answers to it because you've, different flavors of music, but how do you hope that it impacts the listener?
I think it would have to be the same way that music impacted me, which is inspired. Like I want people to feel inspired, because that was really important for me when I was like coming of age, and even now, I mean, I'm still coming of age, but like just having music that inspires you and makes you feel like, that the world understands you in a weird way, that you kind of can relate to these abstract sounds and melodies. And I really like seeing people flow to my music, like in the crowd, like and that's just kind of like a random fact. Like it's pretty cool. I like to, I don't flow dance. Like I don't have any flow props. I've never gotten into it. I just haven't learned yet. But I'm constantly like, when I listen to music, I'm just kind of flowing with my hands and like dancing in my own kind of like, custom way, my signature style, which is totally random and, goofy. But yeah, I hope people do that, just like vibe to it and feel it. And if they're good at dancing, then dance. And if they're not, then they should also dance. And yeah, it's just like dancing for sure. But I've heard people listen to it on road trips. Some of my favorite places to listen to music are like on hikes, like at the top of a hill or whatever, just like put on some beats, or on long drives, going for a walk around the neighborhood. Like it is kind of like if you're my manager, I'd be like, yeah, 5 a.m. could be a lifestyle brand, it's like you could listen to it anytime. But I don't want to get too into the branding of it, because it's also like it's got like strong emotion in it. So that's kind of like the weird thing about my music, is that like in my more emotional tracks that are a little bit more like moody and kind of like mellow, how are people supposed to listen to it? Because it's not the type of music that you can go hard to, like dance to and like get low and stuff. I have some stuff like that as well. Like I have a good balance of 50-50, but I also like just like soulful shit that you can put on when you're just hanging out, cleaning your room, whatever. But yeah, push the boundaries. Like I want to push the boundaries partially because I want people to understand that like that there are people really pushing the boundaries in art. And I do see myself as like part of a lineage, like the French impressionists back in the early 1900s, making crazy impressionist paintings that are just meant to be kind of looked at and enjoyed, like, but don't have a story behind them. They don't have like a strong narrative. They just have kind of like a vibe, like, and some things have both. And that's something one day down the line I'd like to get involved in, like storytelling somehow. But it's always been more of a challenge for me. I really like things that are kind of just like a snow globe, like a frozen moment in time, rather than a first this happens, then this happens, like narrative structure. Like I wouldn't be the person necessarily to write a novel, at least not now in my life, maybe in the future. But I more prefer like a still life, or like a landscape, like just a vibey, like scene, like that's what I want my music to do, is to just kind of like set a scene or set a vibe, but not necessarily like be a strongly identifiable story or narrative. But yeah, so just I want the music to kind of like liven up people's space and maybe decorate their space in a cool way, like art or paintings would, and also to be something that people can dance and get down to and have fun to. So I think fun, interactions, relationships, connections. Like there have been people who have interacted and connected at my shows who, I would hope that my music is like a cool vehicle for that, or container for that.
Hell yeah. Sam, man, thank you so much for coming on here, being so genuine with your answers. 5 a.m. on SoundCloud. You can follow him on Instagram, all that with the Rust music. But, any message you want to leave your fans off with here Any things for them, things they can look forward to while we're wrapping up?
Ooh, okay. Let's see. What do we want to talk about? I would say that if you're looking for a message, or if you're looking for some cool advice, I would say just like keep learning and keep reading and surrounding yourself with inspiring shit that makes you remember what you love and remember what you love to do. And it'll like work wonders and pay off like volumes in the future. Like it's really important to just like surround yourself with cool shit that you like. And, you know, whether that be pictures, whether that be toys and objects, and whether that be music that you love, just like seek out inspiration wherever you can, and it'll come back to you in volumes. So with that said, yeah, my Instagram handle is at 5ammusic_. And I really appreciate whatever kind of like boost that people could give by following that, liking and commenting on whatever they see that they like. There's going to be a bunch of new content coming out soon. I've kind of been slow and sitting on stuff for a while, but I've got a mix coming out. It's gonna be 10K gems. So I have 11,000 on SoundCloud now, but better late than never. So 10K gems is on its way. And we also got a really cool trio video, that Tipper after party at New Conscious that we played back in August. It was like the Tipper Red Rocks after party. That video is coming out, and I really am happy with how it came out. So stoked to decorate the void in the future and put some more cool shit into people's ears and eyes.
Decorating the void. Sam, 5 a.m. Follow him on Instagram. I'm going to plug that into my story. Sam, man, thank you so much for coming on here, man. I love so much of what you said. And yeah, just the context around like kind of knowing what makes you you is going to make listening to your music all the more cool.
Hell yeah. Thanks, Cam. I love to hear that. And yeah, I'm stoked to know you now, and hopefully get to hear more about what you do and all that cool shit. So yeah, thanks for hosting the podcast. This was fun.
Hell yeah. Shout out to Rust Music. Now for all you listening, we're about to have some of the head honchos of Rust up on a part 2 interview. So buckle up and maybe go grab some popcorn or whatever it is that you crazy kids eat.
Maybe a sandwich.
So here we are on the Weird Music Podcast, Rust Music Edition. The Rust Music took over the stage at Resonance. We've got Pasquale Zinna and Wyler Sanka. These two are some of the main guys behind the scene of Rust Music. So Wyler's the founder. Pasquale, you're editor-in-chief of the blog. What were the biggest hurdles for you into getting to where you're at?
Dude, me being in this position is so much more a matter of happenstance than anything that I've ever consciously done to bring myself here. Getting to this was a matter of like us being in the same friend group, me meeting him and a couple of other mutual friends years ago. And then yet more years go by before I even come to learn that Wyler, for a while now, had been operating the Rust back in the day as just a one-man job. Like it was his blog about the shit that he was into, particularly all of this, you know, cool, weird, wacky electronic music. And I remember talking to our friend and our other co-owner, Francesco, being like, I like writing. I know that Wyler does this thing. Do you think that there would be some chemistry there? I very briefly rejoined a publication that I had had the opportunity to write for under false pretenses so that I could interview our third co-founder, Malachi. And maybe a few weeks later, we had the Rust launch party. And I'm sorry, they did. And then, I don't know, like a week after that or something, I was in the car on the way to Camp Bisco, and I got a phone call from him, and he just laid it out. He was like, hey, I liked the writing. This sounds nice. I know you. Do you want to give this a shot? And off we went, right off to the races.
What about you, Wyler?
I was a late bloomer with the electronic music and the jam. So I didn't get into really any of it until after college. I graduated in 2013, 2011-ish area. You know, I knew Spangle and I knew like the Skrillex, Ruskos, Neros. I went to a couple shows. I went to a Pretty Light show and I enjoyed it, but I was in college in bumfuck Pennsylvania. It wasn't really near a city, didn't have friends that were into it growing up. So it just kind of went by me, but I was always a music head. But yeah, 2013 started going to stuff. And after like a year of going to shows and, you know, having a friend group and being around, I don't know. I was like obsessive. I've always been obsessive about downloading and cataloging and listening to music. So I was always, like I said, looking for novelty, Francesco or whoever's showing me new stuff. And I just needed like an outlet because I had a Facebook group where I was just, you know, posting 20, 30 links a day of music, just like constant stuff. And actually, that's where I met a lot of people. I mean, I probably came closer with Pasquale and some of the other people just from that Facebook group because I would invite everybody to it and it'd be all different kinds of music. And then yeah, I just needed to do something besides just drop YouTube links. So I started writing stuff. I made a SoundCloud and started reposting stuff. And I followed hundreds and hundreds of SoundCloud pages. And I would just repost everything I liked. I would message artists and be like, hey, I'm putting you in this month's playlist if you want to post it, whatever. And I would write up whatever articles I liked. And then I wound up hosting some mixes, but like the label wasn't there. I wasn't working with artists. It was just me. And it was, you know, I was unemployed for part of it. And then I was like working at a restaurant for part of it. So I just dumped like all my free time into posting stuff and, you know, hitting people up. And a lot of the artists I wound up kind of reposting and connecting with now are now artists that we've released or that are, you know, our good friends or who we've been able to book or, you know, whatever. After like a year of that, it became a lot. I was like working more and Francesco had graduated college and he actually took a road trip from the West Coast with Malachi, who is the, you know, the third owner along with me and Francesco and one of the artists that, you know, we rap and work with. They both went to NYU and lived in New York and were in Colorado or Cali for something. And they took a road trip. And by the end of it, Chesco was managing Malachi and he was like, yo, I want to do the Rust stuff. So like, let's do it. And then from then on, it was like, you know, me, Francesco and Malachi are pretty different people with like different specialties. So we've just kind of grown. But from then it's just been like full steam ahead. And luckily we were able to bring Pasquale on and Mark for a while. And, you know, we work with Jesse and Caton and, you know.
So you guys, you're leaders of this organization, you know, I assume not everyone's making like a full-time wage.
This is a passion project and a side hustle for all of us. We all have something else going on, whether it's a full-time job, a music career, going to school. We all do this on top of you know, other stuff.
Talk to me what leadership's like with that, with everyone having kind of just one foot in.
The reason why there's only, you know, 5, 6, 7 of us, you know, there's only a handful of us is because we're all very good friends who all are in this because it's something that we genuinely care about and believe in. It all just comes back to like believing in the project. Jesse's a good example. Jesse is like the most recent official, you know, member of the Rust, and he heads, you know, he does bookings for all of our artists, and he throws events in Philly. And he's been throwing events in Philly and elsewhere and doing bookings for artists longer than I've known him. It's got to be people who are willing to put in the time that aren't in it to just make money. And the incentive is that it makes you happy and it's positive for, you know, the artists you're working with and the people who go to your shows. Like, it sounds kind of cheesy, but it's, yeah.
I think it's also important to mention again, as you did, say the main money-making vehicle through the operation is when we throw events. More often than not, at least half of the lineup, sometimes fucking all of it, is going, like, it's going to be Rust artists. And the vast majority of the cash that we walk out with at the end of the day, we don't walk out with it. They walk out with it. Because that's kind of what this is all about in the first place. Beyond just the functionality of like getting music out to the people, the other just as significant like role that the whole company plays is to provide an opportunity for the artists that we manage and that we just, you know, have under our umbrella, to provide them the opportunity to turn this into a significant opportunity somehow, some way. You know, that's the payoff. That's the payoff for that is so goddamn worth it. Like the look on their face when they just absolutely send it home on a great performance to a fucking crowd. It's priceless. Half of me for sure loves the idea of doing the Rust full time, just waking up, eating and breathing the Rust. And in the industry that I work in for my daytime career, the way that it ebbs and flows, I often take a break at the end of projects. And during those periods of time across the last 4 years, that's sort of how I operated. I would just wake up and do Rust things for 5 or 6 hours. And that was my day. That was my routine. That's what I centered my routine around. But there are a lot of interesting doors to be opened within what I do during the day. And the impetus to do that comes directly from all of the Rust stuff.
Yo, so you work on skyscraper construction and you say the Rust gives you confidence to do that. Tell me more about that.
Site safety professional, which is a whole other ballgame. An honest answer to your question about the relationship between those two things, I stay sane by doing Rust work while I'm at my day job all day and night. It is the great equalizer to my life. Particularly taking on the editor role is what made me finally sort of trip the wire of confidence, know the couple of different doors that I wanted to attempt to walk through, and now felt like I had the faculties to do so.
Talk to me about if like you're talking to an up and coming DJ, got some like 6 or 7 great songs, no social media, and he's like, yo, how do I get found? What would be your guys' advice?
Spend the money on plugins, on instruments, on ways to perform your music. Figure like spend that. Don't spend that money on promoting the 6 or 7 songs that you have. Like spend that money on making more music. And that's my recommendation across the board. Make more music. Find other people who make music like you do or music that you like. Find that community, whatever niche that is, and bounce your music off of them. 2 creatives working together and bouncing shit off of each other is like the best fucking thing in the world. That's where everything is. It's like
100%.
that, whether it's like artists and someone giving, their friend giving them feedback, or an artist and an artist giving them feedback, like that's like,
it's pollination. It's cross-pollination. And for what it's worth,
cross-pollination. There you go. Find other collectives, that make music that, find the people like us who fuck with that music.
I'm super into business and marketing outside of music, just like in general. Definitely want this podcast to be also music business oriented. Any other questions? You're an interviewer. I imagine you could think of something.
Yeah.
So, like, where along the way did you start to see how you were going to roadmap your podcast? Like, how have you, if you have at all, put together like the down the road vision for yourself, episode by episode basis, perhaps? Do you have like some sort of a wider arc that you're trying to take each episode on, or do you really like to just dive into the bits of each individual?
So pre-pandemic, working for Weird Music. Weird Music owns a venue in Columbus called the Summit Music Hall. A man named Chris Salvato founded Weird Music. And I was working with him, Squall Pat, similar to how, you were working with Wyler here. I was doing the blog and I would do interviews. Like I would get a press pass to go to a festival. Basically, I realized like most interviews are in written format and there's not a lot of great interviews with some of my favorite musicians. What I ended up doing is, so I would do an interview for a quote and I realized like, why don't I just like really be present and try to make it great and just like throw up the interview instead of the soundbite. In terms of the roadmap, like I just wanted to interview people who I think fans would want to see interviewed, like artists I love, of course, but like where it would matter to at least a couple people. This is episode like 40 something. We've got like probably over 100 episodes, but the platform we like didn't renew our subscription by accident and we lost it all. I have a list of people who I want to interview, and I add people to the list. It's not that long, probably like 10, 15 people on there. I keep my eye out. I don't want to interview like my favorite guys, because I don't want to like, I want to be a fan. The goal is not really to have this thing have an arc to it. Like, oh, one day we're going to have Trey on. Like, that's not at all it. Last episode we did was Tom Hamilton, and Holly Bowling. Like, oh my God, these people are geniuses. Like, I listened to whatever interviews I could find of them, not very many. I took notes, and I'm just like, what am I really curious to ask them? So I try to take things on a one-by-one basis, like not have a similar like questionnaire for each person. I'm really trying to think like a journalist, like what are the key inflection points of this person's life? I imagine this isn't really for fans, even though like some people like to listen to the one interview of their favorite artists. Like, it's for musicians. Like I was doing the marketing for a venue here in Columbus, the Summit Music Hall, 5 a.m. I think he mentioned he's playing there in April. But yeah, so like got homies that are like musicians, and so I asked music business questions like on their behalf, and I asked it to artists, and I love talking about improvisation. Like I mentioned, I'm a musician as well. So, I think it's really cool how psychedelics and things you might learn on psychedelics can apply to making music, and things that apply to making music could apply to being just a good person. And, things that can help someone live life as a musician are like just really great principles of life. And yeah, I mean, I rewrote the tagline for this thing the other day. It's like, think CNN 60 Minutes mixed with like a Ram Dass lecture, but featuring your favorite musicians. And that's kind of the vision with this thing.
I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking. And thanks for coming on here. This is cool to meet you guys. I'm from Stamford, Connecticut. So born and raised right outside New York City. Still go back there from time to time. I live
and my dad's from Hamden.
Hamden.
Yeah, not too far.
I played Hamden Little League. I think they like 10-run ruled us or some shit. They had this one kid. It was like 5'10". We're all 10 years old, and it's like
parents kicked him into the woods when he was
Hamden
5, and they were like, "If you come back next year, you can stay."
Basically. Well, hell yeah. The Rust Music, Weird Music Podcast, 5 a.m. Fucking Wyler, Pasquale. Yo, hit me up if you guys are ever coming through Ohio. This is a Weird Music Podcast. Follow them on SoundCloud. So anyone who's listened through this far, drop a message for them.
If you're making really cool music right now, at least if it's like turning your wheels when you're listening to it, I would also like to listen to it. And quite frankly, for the most part, like no matter how much you gauge yourself against the backdrop of all these other artists and producers and musicians who have already been here and who are already doing this shit, this is like almost as deep as the rabbit hole gets with music. I mean, the whole foundations of all of this weird electronic music is simply very much things that are out of the ordinary or out of the zeitgeist or novel and strange. So just let your creativity run really, really fucking wild, because for a fact, I have watched at least half of the artists that we work with come from not a relative infancy, but certainly early enough on where it was like, most of the things that we're sitting there listening to and trading back and forth sound kind of like tin. And now, a couple of years later, not that much time in retrospect, the professional polish on both like the compositional end and the production end, again, it isn't really that much time that goes by as you make the move deeper into the rabbit hole of this music and deeper down the path of learning how to express yourself the way that you want us to hear you. So send it on over and we'll talk about it. We don't have to do anything with it. We can just talk about it.
Keep making music, keep sending it to your friends, keep sending it to us, keep sending it to labels, but make a SoundCloud playlist or something. Make it easy to download because people get a lot of things in the email. Make the shit that you like. And yeah, I mean, it's that simple. Like and I listen to everything that is emailed to us. So send it on over. I'll listen. Yes. Don't send out obnoxious mailers that have automated thing. Like, make it personal. This is your music. Like, tell me about it. Tell me about.
Yeah, we'll see you at the King's Theater. You know, the next time around when Jade and Detox are done. You know, just send them the chat roulette link and you'll be booked. You know, if you're out there listening, love you. You know.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, man.
Next time we're all at a festival, we'll link up sooner and we can.
Yeah, I'll try to fucking make it to Resonance next time and we can kick it.
Hey, I like the sound of that.
But yeah, again, I am gonna do the shameless plug at the end. Check out Ras 5 and Park Breezy if you like hip hop, you like jazzy, chill beats. Just put it out yesterday. We got another release coming up that has not been announced yet. This duo from Amsterdam that makes really fucking awesome high fidelity based music. And yeah, King's Theater, we got Malachi, Smiganot opening, and McNulty also. That's Mark that we were talking about earlier. It's also playing that. So
gonna be famous.
Hopefully we see you soon.
Oh, one more thing. On the topic of making the music, getting better at it, taking the opportunities, we have an education network through our label of like a bunch of our artists, almost half of the roster, who are willing to sit down on a level playing field, zoom into your computer, show you exactly what it is they're working with and how they're working with it, and help get you to where you want to be with your own music.
They can find that at therustmusic.com, yeah?
.net. Rustmusic.net, yes.
Bong bong.
Yeah, bong bong, exactly.
All right, y'all, test your drugs.
All right.